Um, right, we have about 10 minutes for any questions and discussion. Does anybody want to get us started with some questions? If you could tell me who you are, by the way. I think we have a microphone over here. Thank you.
Hello, thank you. My name is Tony Tio from Altran, and thank you for all your presentation. So I do have two questions for Bruce. It's actually, during in your presentation, I think you kind of touched on the reduced cost of energy. And at the end, you came up with a slide showing the potential impact it could have. So you listed different elements, and I think I noticed that for the installation, when you compare the potential against the actual, the actual expected figure, basically, I noticed there was actually a sharp contrast, and that was the sharpest contrast, actually, and I didn't really know what it was for. And also the second question, that's regarding the rotor. Because if we're going for bigger rotors, so that I guess that would mean a big impact on the testing. And I know that sometimes testing fully a turbine can take up to a year or maybe two. So I just want to know, so by going to bigger rotor, what could be the impact on the testing time?
Sure. Okay. Tony, thank you. First question is a nice simple answer. There were two different length bars that I put up. The first was the potential for that innovation. Or group of innovations, which is, hey, when the technology is fully worked through and you've got the full benefit of that innovation taken all the way through to market, on the most attractive site and the most attractive turbine size for that sort of innovation. That's one. And then the other was the anticipated impact, which is how far we think things are going to get by 2020. And the big difference on installation is that we don't expect so much of the float out and sink type solutions to have actually impacted the market substantially by 2020. So this is build it all on land and float it out and dump it in the sea, much less time spent offshore. So that's the key big difference there. In terms of bigger rotors and things like that, I mean, yes, the development time for a turbine is many years. We've seen a number of turbine manufacturers bring out bigger rotors for an existing sort of size turbine. As you go bigger, it takes longer to test blades because they gradually have a lower and lower natural frequency, so you can't waggle them up and down so much when you're doing the testing phase, which can take 6-9 months. But the cost of energy saving is so attractive that we are seeing far more progress in that, a significant move towards those bigger rotors. And that really comes from this bit that the CapEx, the cost of a turbine is only a small fraction of the total cost of energy offshore. You've got all that other infrastructure sitting around, but it's the rotor that generates the energy. So that equation is just quite radically different from onshore. And the industry started off just putting onshore turbines offshore. And especially high wind turbines onshore have pretty small rotors generally. So you think, oh, that's okay. And it's just taken time for the industry to work through and realize that actually the equation doesn't work out like that. So the Siemens and Vestas and Samsung big rotors are about optimum, we think. We went to Vestas before they announced the size of their V164, and we said, oh, we think you should be working on a 165. And they texted me back saying we got it wrong when they came out with 164. But we've got there. It's about right now.
You mentioned at the start of your talk about this tipping point that never comes. Do you think that still exists, or is that just not there?
No, I mean, we see that we're definitely on the brow of the hill or over the hill now. Things aren't still rising. There are projects now that have been delivered in recent time that have been cheaper than past projects. I think an interesting trend, because it's always hard to unpack the headline statements about CapEx and then looking at the actual outturn cost of projects can be quite different. But what we're starting to see is that the industry is realizing that a developer-led project with an internal investment decision and maybe a little bit of fuzziness around risk allocation and things like that, those projects are starting to be shown to be more expensive on average than your project financed project, where everything's got to be tied down very carefully up front, and the banks just won't accept any risk not being allocated. And I think various developers are starting to see that actually that approach does have some real benefits. It's part of the equation of getting on top of costs.
Any more questions?
I'm Elizabeth Block, a writer on renewables. Mauricio, that was very interesting to hear the sort of problems your firm is called in to consult on. I assume this is because of the relative youth of the offshore wind industry compared to automotive or aerospace, but it sounds like you and your colleagues must be quite astonished that some of this data is, all over the place. Could you tell us how common these problems are of poor, inefficiency?
So they're very common across the entire, as we call them, resources industry. So they're not specific to offshore wind in particular, not being singled out as a naughty or silly industry in any way. It's just because of the nature, a little bit, the entire resources industry a little bit behind the curve, and depending where you look at oil and gas or mining, it's a little bit behind. Regarding utilities specifically, it happens actually quite well within utilities when they execute a single project, but there's the specificity about the UK market where the developers are acting in consortia, which is not a typical setup for utilities. And then what you have is actually the competition of the different integrated systems that do work well within the single utility, but how will that happen when the ownership changes and the design plans aren't translated? So there is also questions of good EDM within the single parent company, of interoperability between the different EDM systems of the partners is also raised. Does that adequately answer your question?
I think on that note, one of the interesting things is the industry's grown so quickly. There were things that we were doing in this space 20 years ago that we see people have unlearned the lessons. And we're re-teaching people things that we thought that we got over those issues, those problems, but no, in a market that's growing as quickly as it is, with so many new guys coming into it, we're seeing repeat lessons having to be learned.
I'm going to ask a question now, because we started this off by talking about challenges. I think it's pretty clear there are a lot of challenges for this industry. I've been coming to these conferences for 10 or more years, and we've spent a lot of time talking about the challenges. We've heard a lot about opportunities and solutions though today, and I'd like to get a feel from our panel as to whether they think they're positive or not overall. So maybe starting on my right here, you can just give an indication as to whether in your topic area you're positive that we can find the solutions we need to achieve what we want to achieve.
Certainly on the consenting side and the process that we now have under the Planning Act, I'm very positive about it. It's bedding down. We're seeing the results now, and there are plenty of pipeline decisions awaited, and await the outcome of those with interest.
From the sort of wider consenting point of view, rather than the sort of maybe planning system, there are some very big challenges out there, but I'm very positive that we know what the questions are we need to ask. I think the issue is galvanising people to answer those questions. I think that's particularly the case for Habitats Directive issues and cumulative and in combination effects between wind farms that are getting much larger and arguably more of them out there. But I think we understand what the issues are. It's more about making sure that people are addressing those. That's what I'm working on.
In respect to the financing side, where I am confident is that for the right project packaged in the right way, in the right time frame, funding will be there for it, because these projects are very, very investable. I think the challenges today, as always, are in the medium to long term, because that's where things are less certain. And if you were to ask me that question this time next year, after the strike prices have been announced, I think I will be more comfortable in that space.
Yeah, I agree with that. So it's a good question, Tim. I like the question. I'm pretty positive in the cost reduction area. The industry has a strong can-do attitude. I believe industry can do it. Key is industry having the confidence to do it. Is it worth doing this, making this investment? And I suppose that a lot of that comes down to different governments around the place. And at least we now see key guys within government having the sorts of conversations. This is sort of between Biz, DEC and Treasury, for example. We see them starting to have the right conversations around industrial strategy and strike price and energy strategy. So I'm more confident about things now because I can see that dialogue happening. We're yet to see the result of that dialogue, but yeah, hopeful there.
I think we're quite upbeat about it as well. We had some positive, with a caveat of knowing who it was that said it, but the positive comments about certainty and that the CFDs are on track and will happen over the summer. I think I also jump on Dorothy's comment that once those are there, next time around this year will probably be either entirely more positive or entirely more pessimistic. But provided that those numbers are right, I think we need to do everything we can. And our point of our presentation is that you need to do the big stuff, but the little bits are also good enablers.
Excellent. Well, on that positive and enthusiastic note, we'll draw close to this. Please thank our speakers in the usual manner.